Hey everyone, you're listening to Dirt Grove Podcast with your host, David Burma. All right, so we're getting started here in episode number 8 on Dirt Grove Podcast. Super excited about having a new prospect here, or what are we going to call it? New prospect, a new guest here. So this guest. We farm locally. We're close neighbors. Done a lot of farming, a lot of custom work for my father actually over the years. And he started farming at a very, very young age, 7 years old. He actually got in the trucking business also, got up to 10 trucks. Now he's back just doing the farming thing. And he's just been around forever, has a lot of history, a lot of background of what's worked, what's not worked in the past, and he has a love for running equipment and that kind of stuff. So I think he's got into a bit of the tractor pulls and so forth over the years, and he loves equipment, loves the mechanical side of it. So I'm excited to welcome Billy Douglas. I call you Billy Douglas. Is it Bill Douglas?
That's what I say. Everybody knows me, call me Billy. If I get a phone call and somebody says this Bill, I know they want money.
If you don't know him by Billy, then you know it's a telemarketer or something, you know. Yep. Oh, that's awesome. So Billy, you were saying a little bit about so 7 years old, your dad said, hey, jump in a tractor, keep it between the fence lines, eh?
Yeah, well, he went around the outside of the field two times right at home, and he said, keep it inside the work dirt. And it was an old Case 870 with a cab on it, and probably shouldn't have done it. I mean, you had to get off the seat to push the clutch in. So
that's wild.
But
you're 7.
Yeah, and I think that started my love for it. And then he didn't I was probably quite a bit more active in it by the time I was 10, but he let me do a little bit at 7.
So you're cultivating?
Yeah, it was cultivating, yeah.
That's so cool.
Or it may have been disking, I don't know, but it was something not.
There's some tillage behind you.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Pretty small. Right?
Yeah. So will you just do laps and just keep on coming into the center, or did you go back and forth, or what were you?
Yeah, I was working it on an angle, but anyway, I just kept doing.
Would you lift it up in the end? Or no?
I don't remember.
No, 7 years
probably
old.
Probably didn't.
No.
Right? You know, the hydraulics on that time, I probably didn't have enough muscle to pull the lever, but yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, you know, every year you done a little bit, and your dad said that you had to go off farm to get another income. Is that what he said?
When I got old enough, was going through school. They wanted me to proceed through school, so I went through as a mechanical engineer. Yeah. But I wanted to farm. Dad told me I had to have an off-farm income, so I couldn't foresee myself how I could work out and farm. So that's why we started the trucking company, was so that I had an off-farm income, but yet it was still farm-related. Right. I kept it in my comfort zone, and we just hauled commodities, fertilizer, and liquid fertilizer is what we did. We didn't get into the commercial hauling of general freight.
Sure. So you started young, went into mechanical. Did you always have a love for both the farming and the mechanical side?
Yeah, I did. I remember I had this little Honda 50, and Dad was a mechanic, a licensed mechanic, so he'd be working in the shop, and I tore the little engine apart and put it back together. I can't tell you how well it ran when it came. It probably didn't run long, but I was young when I did that. I'd be prior to 10 years old when I did that. So, but I would have been older than 7, so I might have been rounding 10, and that was my first experience. But Dad started tractor pulling the year I was born. Well, he started with farm tractors before that, but they built their first modified with his brother-in-law when I was either about 1 year old. And so he was always out there welding, working on motors. With the high performance motors, you're always tearing them down. So I was just always in there, and I just learned. I have no training in mechanics, but I can fix something if I need to.
Yeah. So you don't necessarily do a lot of that. You try not to do as little as possible when you're talking about your tractors. You kind of run decent equipment. You don't necessarily want to buy old stuff and have to fix it.
No, I'm getting too lazy for that. So, and the last tractor I rebuilt was a 2590 Case. We redid it, and I put it in. That was about 2010. I run enough stuff now that I pay the bill at Paulinski's. Yeah. What I do.
Yeah. And why? Because you just don't have the desire, or you just like, you know.
Oh, the desire's there, but now with running the more current tractors, usually don't have many engine problems. So you go back there, it's a tech thing. Like I don't have any computers or anything. Like
50% is the ability just to even understand, diagnose it. Yeah.
As far as if it was just straight mechanics the way it was before, that's no
Right.
problem. But yeah, it's just the same as your car. Like
Right.
I had one of my kids' friends come in one day and said the car wasn't running right. Could I look at it? So I went to the window and looked at the car, and they're like, "You gonna do anything?" I'm like, "No, because I don't know." Like, I don't have the tools or the computer to figure out what's wrong with your car.
Yeah. Interesting though. Our mechanic, automotive mechanic, he has a Snap-on computer. Mm-hmm. He updates it. I mean, there's a bunch of money, so you have to have enough. Enough vehicles to justify it. But he actually can do all the diagnosis with it too, and up to date and everything. So that's kind of cool. For all the different models, that's cool. So Billy, farming. What do you don't mind? What do you cultivate now? How many acres do you cultivate?
2,100.
2,100. And majority you own a little bit of rent, half and half. And those relationships, the rented stuff, is it something you just built over years?
100% of the people that I rent from now is actually customers that my dad had when he was farming, and he would work with their husbands and that. And unfortunately, where things have went is I rent, well, other than for the exception of one couple, I rent strictly from ladies. Like their husbands have passed, but they had retired, and Dad was sharecropping with them before that. And then, then after my dad passed, they just carried on with me.
Wow,
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so my dad he got into farming in the '80s, and he didn't own a lot of equipment, right? Mm-hmm. And so you guys done a lot of custom work for us.
Yes.
Right? Some years he said that his yield was the moisture was higher in the beans than the yield.
Well, I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus, but he had some tough stuff sometime. I remember one farm that he's had, and I'm not a huge sports watching guy, but back when the Blue Jays were going to win the first World Series, or was in the first World Series, that caught the attention of everybody. And I remember I put the game on, and that game went into overtime. And I'm sorry to the sports fans if overtime isn't what it is. Went into extra innings.
Sure.
I listened to the pregame stuff, the game, and the aftergame stuff, and never dumped the combine doing beans. and your dad come for a few rounds with me, and he looked in the back and he says, "I think another bean just came in." But he didn't want the field to be done, but crop insurance said because there's beans standing there, it had to be harvested, but it was painful.
Wow.
But your dad was an out-of-the-box thinker, and he could foresee that someday things were going to change. And you take that same farm today, like I know the farm I was on, you take that same farm today, and where your equipment, your tillage, and everything has changed, as well as genetics, that's changed that scenario. Yeah. Back in the day in the 80s, we had stuff like that. And it wasn't just your dad. We all had stuff that if we had that piece of land, that if everything just wasn't right, that's what you got was almost nothing.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not going to make fun of your
dad. No, he doesn't mind. He doesn't mind. He thinks it's funny too. He says he would never, whenever he had an opportunity to invest in fertilizer or tile or anything, he says, well, I could invest in that and get more yield, or I could buy more land and get more yield.
Yes,
that's what he said.
Yeah,
it might be not an increase in yield; it'd be just more bushels.
Yeah. Well, that was very specific because when we did the planting, and especially for corn, we had a set. That's what we were to do. Like it was like your dad mathematically had it down to a science for his goals and where he wanted to go with it. And no disrespect to Harry, but I know a lot of us around here thought he was just
crazy.
Like I'd just be straight with it. But as time went, it's not so much that he was crazy. I also know that people that are willing to take a risk can lose or can be rewarded. If you're not willing to do that, you don't get either one. You get to be like we are. We sit around, we talk about the guy that's taking the risk,
the next job,
But at the end of the day, everything is amazing. Like I mean, it was like he could foresee the future that look, things are going to get better, and he
watched a few patterns. He watched a few economic patterns, and that's what he was betting on, was the economical patterns. So interesting enough, he always said that he made his money in the spring.
Okay, like what do you mean?
Yeah, so he made his money based on his expenses.
Oh yeah.
So he was only measuring his expense, and so that's what he was looking at. He says, okay, if I'm going to get a poor yield, right? So he bet it on a poor yield. And then he went backwards and said, how do I make my expenses as little as possible, right?
Yes, because he had it set out to the fields of how many dollars worth of corn fertilizer he's putting on this cornfield and that, and so long before they came out with yield maps or came out with any of this precision farming, Harry was already deciding what is the potential that this farm has got, and I'm not going to overfeed that potential because I'm throwing money out the door that I could put into another field. Right.
Yeah,
makes total sense to me now. Right. But
and we farm differently, so it's not as necessary. Right. That kind of stuff, because we are trying to get like the high yields and do what we necessary on that. So we were talking too about we're talking about 2007, Billy. You said that was the last difficult year for you guys farming.
For me, yeah. And it's memorable because that's the year my dad passed away on June 6, 2007. Yeah. Corn was knee high then. I was already hauling liquid 28 out. Guys were just calling left, right, center because they were side dressing. Yeah. And so we looked like we were set up for the best farming year ever. And then, of course, we had his funeral on the 11th. It rained a little bit on our shoulders. And that year, right where we are here, we didn't have rain again until September 4th.
Wow.
Our corn yields were 109 bushel, and I think I don't know if beans hit 20 bushel. They were either just under or over, but plus minus that 20 bushel mark. That's been the last year. So for 16 years, we've now had 15 crops that's been good, from either yield-wise to commodity price to both.
Right. But we've never had a devastating yield on yieldage, is what you're saying, since then.
No, I don't recall. We haven't, no.
And so prior to that 2007,
yes,
it seemed like it was much more common. Like even in 1999, they had the volcano, wasn't it? Was that the volcano that covered up and then
sooted and covered up and did what they were afraid the wildfires were going to do this year?
Right.
They take your sunlight away, but
but prior to that, it was more common, you're saying, to have a bad yielding year.
Oh yeah, like you could bank on not a good yield 1 in every 4 to 1 in every 5 years. Right. And it seems like we haven't had that cycle last 15 years. We haven't had anything devastating like that. We've had other issues to deal with some bugs and that.
Sure.
But
Sure. So, and I've been checking this out. So there's a big swath of land coming available to rent, and I don't know exactly what it was renting for before, but the people that had it aren't sticking with it because the price, there's enough money to make the difference. And so I decided to crunch some numbers on it, Billy. And so after I've done the whole numbers, okay, so you can look at corn expense at $500, right? Approximately, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 550, somewhere in there. And you can look at, say you rented the land for 400, let's just say, right? So you're at 950, right? And so at $6 corn we're getting right now, right? You're left with $300, right? 950.
Yeah.
600. Well, if you got 200 bushel, which I don't think it's going to be 200 bushel.
At 200 bushel, you're tightly $300.
I know. And I'm not expecting 200 bushel, but I'm just doing it for easy math. Right.
Yeah.
So I do the math, and it's 300 bushel. You know what I was doing too, though, Bill, was that I was checking out the interest rates, right? And I was taking what my costs were for the land rent, for the inputs and that kind of stuff. And I know it's not a full year, but if you consider the interest rate, it's also another $50 off that.
Yes.
Right? At 6-7%.
Yep.
So I think people have to really sit back because the numbers have changed. This year was $650 for price of corn. Last year was $9 if you sold at harvest.
Yeah.
Right? And the year before, I think it was $10 if you sold at harvest.
Don't remember.
I think it was somewhere around that $10. And maybe it wasn't at harvest. Maybe it was later in the year. But anyways, so now, and I've talked to the commodity guys just before this, but I think Brazil is outproducing U.S. on corn. They're definitely outproducing them on beans. We don't have population growth anymore across the world, especially North America. It's maybe even going. It would be going down if we didn't have immigration. Right. We won't talk about immigration, but so if we didn't have immigration, we would have no population. It'd be a decrease, and in general, in the whole the world. We don't have a big population surge, that's for sure. And then we have in recessionary times. And so what happens when interest rates are 7%, we buy more as we need to.
Yeah.
Right. So people aren't stockpiling with huge grain reserves and that kind of stuff, because I'm not going to hold, hundreds of $millions of grain that can perish, and I pay high interest rates. Right. And as long as we feel like there's lots of commodities in the world, people won't buy as much either. Like when they feel there's a possibility of a shortage, then they have more of a tendency of buying. So the question is like, are we going back to $9 and $10? And I just don't feel like we are. I think we're going to be sitting around that $6 to $9 cash, Canadian cash, over the next, 3 years. And so when you look at everything, and actually I spent some time, I put the S&P 500, right? Mm-hmm. And over the last 10 years, and the S&P 500 would give you a 12% return over the last 10 years. Mm-hmm. So all you do is take your money, right, and put in the S&P 500. And when you include inflation, it's around 10%, right? So you start looking at, renting land and doing all the work, right? And, you come back out at 17%, right? After all the work and everything going right, everything going right, everything going well, right? With a 17% return. And you could have just took that money and put in the S&P 500.
Right, yeah. And you've got no cost of operation right. in the S&P, right? Like,
no stress, no cost of operation. Yeah. And if you want to take your vacation, you can go ahead.
Yeah. I don't. That's been a question that farmers have probably asked themselves for years. Like, why do I do this? I take a look. Like, we all got other business friends, right? And some business friends that own corporations and that. And when you look at them and say, when I tell them that story that my dad said I had to have an off-farm income and able to supplement the farming, I had a guy that owned 3 companies that I went to school with in London, and he's like, why would you do that? He just looking like, why would you take money from another source and put into something that requires?
That goes against normal thinking in business. Right. Yeah.
But what they don't have is family tradition. They don't have family land. They don't have the ties.
Lifestyle.
That kind of stuff. Everything
for
else.
Sure.
But now I've veered off. I forgot your question.
No, that's right. No, yeah. We have a backyard that goes on forever.
Yeah,
that's kind of nice. You don't have that in the city, right?
Yeah.
You don't have the city lifestyle. No, that's right, 100%. So that's a big part of it. But I think the big part we miss off quite often is the difference between the rental land, which should be a cash flow generating thing.
Yes.
So that should be your cash flow, and then the land you own, which should be your investment.
That's right.
Right, and your rented land should generate enough cash that you're excited to go to work every day. Mm-hmm. Right, your land you bought, that doesn't really matter. It has to pay the bills.
Yeah.
Right, because that's where quite frankly, if you're a straight farmer, basically you live poor and you die rich.
Usually.
Right, because it's an investment business. It's not a cash flow business, right? Whereas other business could be, you have lots of cash, but in the day you don't have much invested because all you have is a building and whatever, your inventory that's inside of it, right? So it's a little bit different. So the trucking business, you went up to 10 trucks. If you were to do it all over again, Bill, what would you done differently in the trucking side?
What I would have done differently in the trucking side is everybody wants to own a truck, and I think everybody should once. Like the business treated me well, but if I was to go back again, all I would do is buy trailers because there's so many young guys and guys want to own their own truck. There's a prestige in having your truck. I would have made more money if I just bought 20 trailers and just hired the brokers to pull it. Because my biggest expense was my power plants. That's where all your risk is.
Yes, all the risk is.
And so if I was to do it again, but outside of what I did, I don't regret what I did. The only thing I maybe regret a little bit about what I did is I didn't like borrowed money. So I would go down and one guy had helped me get started was Murray Campbell that owned Transit Trailer. And I went down to him and I bought my first new trailer from him. And I said, if I give you a third of the trailer down now, I'll give you a third in 30 days and final pay it on day 60. And he went for it. And for me to plate the trailer, he had to put it in my name. And so he put a lot of trust in me because once it was in my name, But I really appreciate that fact because he let a young guy get going. We did that with our first 3 or 4 trailers as we were expanding it.
Wow.
What I look back at now, because I ran hard, I sacrificed a bit of family life. I had 2 young girls at home, and one a baby and one 3. And I don't know, there for 7 or 8 months, I spent maybe 2 nights at home because I was running hard enough to pay it. Now, at the end of the day, that was paid, and then you didn't have any debt over your head.
Sure.
But at the other end, carrying debt from a business standpoint isn't the end of the world either. But I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
But I fell out of that thing. I have debt now. So.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think there's both sides of the debt story you got to be aware of.
Yeah.
You know, when interest rates go up like they are, you know, we can get in a situation where it's like, wow, you know, we were at 2.5 and now we went to 7.
Yeah.
And we weren't expecting that. And that happened in a very short period of time. Yeah. Right. And so there's that part. But I do believe, you know, the bank's job is to find good people to invest into. And that's what that's their job, right? They like doing that. But there's nothing wrong with having debt if it makes sense, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd say go more towards brokers and that kind of stuff. What would you say, like in farming and trucking and that kind of stuff? What was the most painful point in your career, most difficult point in your career, and why do you think it was there, and what could you do to mitigate it?
Oh, like one of the difficult times was just back. This was a lesson for me. So back, I don't know whether it was 2001 or 2002 when the aphids first hit.
Yeah.
I remember I was going along and I was a little bit thick-headed, wouldn't listen to my dad, so I was doing my own thing like everybody wants to be independent.
Yeah.
And I remember that year aphids hit, and even with the crop insurance and that, we didn't get enough income. And I remember I had to go borrow $10,000 from the bank to pay my income tax that year. And so my thought pattern was, okay, that's fine. I said to my wife, everything's good. I said, we are not, this won't happen again 2 years in a row. It did. We had aphids again the next year. And at that point in time, the bank came to me and told me that they were no longer funding me. And so we farmed for 2 years on a strict cash basis, and we did it. We cut back, didn't take the kids to McDonald's, we didn't do nothing, and we farmed on a cash level. And then we had another financial institution look at me and they said, why did they sigh? I said, I didn't know. And they looked at our credit rating and said, but your credit rating's right at the top. He should not have done this to you. Well, it was a power trip from the banker, and I won't mention his name, but I mean, as I got older, I realized that. And then as the years went by and I was a little more successful, it was fun because he was still my mom's banker after my dad passed. And it was great to sit across the table and just have fun with him because I wasn't reliant on him. And I realized that he pulled a power trip over no good reason, but it caused me 2 years to farm on a cash basis, which then we learned a lot. But I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to say it was easy. It was tough. But we had to feed the goose that was laying the golden egg, which at that time was our farming, and still struggling to keep, like we had the trucks going too. But
what did it teach you?
Would it teach me?
Yeah.
Oh, it humbled me down quite a bit.
Okay.
That for sure. I mean, I remember one time I just made a smart comment to my dad about what I was doing, and I got into emus thought it was a solid market, but a speculative market, and we made a boatload of money the first year. I didn't tax shelter it with anything, and I just remember my dad sitting at the end of the table eating, and he never said a whole lot anyway, but I said to him, Dad, I don't know why you're still farming. I've done this year. I made more money than you did on all, and he put his fork down and he said, well, that's good, son, but he says, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Well, 18 months later, the bottom falls out of the market. I mean, I also paid enough income tax that year that I could have bought a good car. And so we had 2 humbling experiences. Yeah. The fortunate part that I believe that was for me is it happened when I was in my early 20s and not learning the lesson when I'm in my late 50s.
Right.
Like, so I actually thankful for that opportunity of that lesson. It's also made me nervous to where, it made me nervous of my own, and I watch what's going on today, and I watch what some people are doing, and I hope it works for them. And the reason I hope it works for them is I haven't got the nerve to do it.
Right, yeah.
Because of the humbling I had. But I mean, I also know that if you don't take a risk, you don't get a gain.
Yeah. So no, that's cool. So, but what would it taught you in far as like working on a cash basis, did it teach you to look at the numbers differently, maybe a little bit too? Like as far as
we smalled the numbers down. Like we weren't going for the pie in the sky yield. We were going specifically, where do you think we're going to market our crop at value-wise, crop price, and what do you think you're going to get for yield? So back then when we were doing that, probably 38 bushel was the average yield. So we were penciling everything, Tammy and I, on 35 bushel an acre beans, and we were penciling everything on 125 bushel corn, even though we were running about 140 bushel corn at the time. But we pulled back where sometimes I got some friends that sit across the table and it's like, I grow 240 bushel corn every year. And I'm like, do you? Right. You know, like they probably do in the fields where they hit and watch your yield monitor, but are you really growing 204? Like, yes. And I said to Tammy, it's fine to tell your friends that. That's all good, but if you believe it yourself, that's where you could run into a situation.
Right. Like, I think that's really cool lesson, because I think what happens is that during good times we become wasteful.
It's easy to become wasteful.
It's very easy.
I'm guilty of that myself too. Like I went and done stuff that, of course. Even with the lessons I've learned, I've still done crazy things where I've just went out and spontaneously bought something I didn't really need. So you're right. When times are good, and you know, the 2 years ago really inflated that, with the printing of money. It falsified the money supply to where people thought they were rich, to where now they're coming back to realizing they weren't.
No, right.
And I'm not specifically talking farms. I'm just talking people in general.
Yeah, right? No, 100%. 100%. So, and that's the problem, is that you're dealing with so much more money. So you know, when, as I say, the chickens come home to roost, it's going to be a little more aggressive, you know, when it does happen in the future, right? Oh, yeah. And, you know, guys that have old money and sitting on old money with not as much debt, they'll be all right. But it's the people that are, you know, strapped, right, and playing it tight, it's a much riskier game. You know, if commodity prices don't turn around, if interest rates don't, you know, drop a bit and that kind of stuff. Interesting. That is very interesting. You know, I watched also my brother. He lived in Michigan and now he lives at home. He still runs a fairly good sized farm in Michigan, and I think he's been more profitable since he hasn't been on the farm.
Sorry, I was drinking coffee. You said it. Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think just because you look at more of a business,
right?
You don't look at it. You're not emotional. You don't do stupid things. You don't say, "Well, you know what? I think I'm going to get into hay this year."
Right.
You know, I don't think I'm going to get into, you know, trying this other thing, right? Because you're there and you come up with ideas because you think it might be okay. Another fellow called me up the other day and he says, well, you know, I'm thinking about this other job, like do this other project, that kind of stuff. And I sat back and I said to him, I said, listen, what have you done well in the past and you've done and made good money, right? Well, he's a young guy, right? And he said, cash crop farming. I said, okay, what kind of cash crop farming? He says, organic farming. I says, okay, organic farming. I said, and is it any type of organic farming? And do you get same yield as everybody else? Higher yield or lower yield on organic farming? And he says, I'd say I get a higher yield. I says, why do you get the higher yield? Well, we have a good source of manure. I said, okay, great. See, you got to break it all down, understand where you're making your money, how you've done it well, and then if you want to make more, just keep on adding to that supply. Don't come and that's where I've always had painful experiences. I was like, been successful here, so if I start this other business, it's going to be successful also, right? And it's like, no, it's not going to be. Just because you've been successful in one thing doesn't mean you're successful in another thing. And it's because it's not necessarily your strength or whatever. And not saying that couldn't be, but you don't have the history behind to understand it, right? And there's only a few people in life that can, you know, start multiple different things. You know, the Elons of life that are able to do that. But that's not normal. That's anomaly, right? And I think we gotta understand that. So how do we so for those that are listening in that are younger and want to understand, you know, history about commodity prices and about difficult yield years and that kind of stuff, what has history told you, Bill, that about just about commodity prices, about yield, about all that kind of stuff, about, like, you know, we've had, like you said, you had 15 years here that's been good, or 13 or 15 years. Do you see that being the same in the future? If not, how do you see it being different? What's your thoughts?
Okay, and just there's a lot that's a pretty loaded question. What I see is like, I take a look that everybody says, like, as an example, invest in a stock market, put your money in there. A financial advisor will tell you to hold because history will show you that it's always increased. Right. Same thing with buying land and the land price. If you look at land prices over history, nobody can argue the fact that they've constantly gone up. There's been they've softened and stuff, and everybody that's my age or older knows exactly when that happened. So history will teach. They always say history repeats itself, but the young ones should understand that history that's going to repeat itself, because right now a lot of them are rolling like I don't think they're following the history or even believe that history repeats himself, because you just mentioned there, we've had 15 years since my dad passed. That's been good. We should have had 3, if not 4 downturns in that 15-year period, and we haven't. Everything's just kept rocking and rolling. Yeah, we had a house crash in 2008 and everything, but as an agriculture industry, we haven't seen really a downturn at all, and we should have. My biggest fear is when we see that downturn for the correction, it could be a long stint. It might not just be a year or two, and I'm hoping that we don't have it, but inevitably history tells us we're going to have it, and so they just got to make sure they've got that penciled into their figures when they're rolling, that history does repeat itself to some portion, and so we will have some tougher times. Who knows when that's going to be? Goes back to your previous statement. If our government chooses to print more money, it'll extend that time period of good times. But if they decide that they got to halt it, then it will put us into those times by default.
Right.
And not saying it's good or bad. It's just that it's reality. I really hope no other kid has to go and not take their own child to a McDonald's or something because they can't afford it like we had to. But I mean, it could come to that.
Yeah. So 2 things on that. They think the people that are in economics, they're worried more about a stagnation than a recession, like where it stays stagnant and just doesn't go up or down. It just kind of flatlines. That's one of the concerns they have. But no, I agree. It's interesting that that it's been as good as it has been. And the thing is that, like, I think back in the 80s too, it actually dropped significantly. Like, to see a 50% decrease in land prices wouldn't be done unheard of, right? Even in history. Right?
It's not that it hasn't happened.
No.
It happened in my lifetime. Like you said, exactly. The 80s. I was 10 years old then. I was a perfect age for when it happened. I was too young to be invested. Right. And we've got some guys that are just a few years older than me that bought land then, and their family didn't want them buying land in that. And you know what? They're still farming today. They hung on. But I mean, you want to talk to some guys that had to many, many years of tough times. Like, they're living it okay now.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's where I go back and talk about a business person would look and say, what are you doing? Because they just stayed right in a business, but they were in it for the love of the land, family land. They wanted to carry on a legacy. And it was great. But it was not so great for some people, but for some, they struggled through and made it. And then I had others that they tried to hang on, and then after they let go, they were talking to us back, actually, so it's a few years ago, but they came to my dad's funeral, and they weren't farming anymore, and I asked them what they were doing now, and they said, we didn't want to let the farm go, but you know what, I'd have still been paying for it today. And he says, I've went on and had an okay life. So
yeah, sure.
But so there's 2 sides of it. But
and farmers that you've seen successful in general, were they commodity guys? Were they crop farmers or livestock farmers, or what makes a successful farmer in general over the years? Like, you've looked back and say, well, that guy was successful. What made him successful in farming?
I don't know, because there's all kinds of different scenarios to success, right? Most farmers that I personally know are more along the line of what you say. We live cash poor all our life, we die rich. And so that happens. I think the biggest change there was, and I mean, everybody can look, hindsight is more than 100% clear. Yeah. We had I was all approved to get into broiler chickens in 1992. The chicken quota was $11.95 a unit then. And I was going to put up 20,000 units, and we know that all would have worked. So the supply management side of things has worked well for farmers on this side, because we like, we were in a sport of tractor pulling that took us across a lot of the U.S. So with it being tractor pulling, a lot of the base of the tractor pullers then were farm guys, right? And like I know some guys with Ron Barges over there. I don't know what he's got today, but he had like 800,000 laying hens there, and he wasn't making near as much money as a guy here that had 80,000. Like it was just right. And so the supply management has worked for those farmers. So the difference, there's toughness for everybody. So everybody went through tough times, even the guys getting into supply management. Yeah. But we look at it today and we know that's the direction we should have went, because maybe it's not for them, but for a guy like myself that's not in supply management, my glasses look pretty rosy when I'm looking at them, right?
Sure. You know, interesting. I do some farming for. I have a beef barn for. And I don't own the cattle in it. There's 700 head in there, and I don't feed the cattle, but I get paid per head per day to feed them. And the guy that owns the cattle, he makes his own mineral. He brings in like bakery goods from the grocery stores. They tear the bags apart. Not physically, they have a machine that does it.
Yeah.
But they basically focus on cutting out. Like he goes around and picks up all the calves from all the different dairy farms, right? And across Quebec, across Ontario. And he's cut out most of the middlemen in most of the process that he does. And I would have no idea how many cattle he owns. Incredible amount. But, you know, and I'm happy with my pay, you know. And everybody else that farms from him is fairly happy with the pay. But it's kind of built the same kind of scenario where you have one guy that has kind of managed the process and made sure that the profit is there by doing by scale and that kind of stuff, and learning how to cut out some of those expenses along the way and built a business out of it. Where supply management is kind of, now this guy doesn't get to control the price on the outside, but he controls a lot of the input costs, right? And the supply management is kind of the other way, where they have a fixated price on the outside, which controls their profit. And I think the thing that's also made them successful in a sense is that the banks are really okay with them running with really tight margins. The supply management can run at way tighter margins than anything else, because they don't have the variability, right? That crop farmers have, or beef farmers or hog farmers and that kind of stuff, right? So I think that's two things that have allowed them to grow. But yeah, it's definitely, any time you looked at it, probably was always hard to make sense of it, right? Yeah. But it was because of their increases and that kind of stuff that's really paid off over the years.
Right. I know you asked me what I thought the difference was between the successful farmers, is what made successful farmers. I was just thinking it as you were saying that, and it's the guys that took down and took more control of their operation, like you're saying, to cut out the middlemen, because no matter whether it's the agriculture industry or just industry in general, the middlemen, a lot of them get paid a lot of money that don't really need to be in that position. And number two is some of the cash crop farmers, we've just stuck with corn, wheat, and soybeans, and like some edible beans once a little bit, but some guys have went and created their own markets and gone into more specialty cropping and found their own markets for it, and I think that's also gives them a little more leeway. They're working with a little more profit per acre, so it gives them a little more chance to grow.
Right. They go right to retail.
Yeah. 100%.
100%. Yeah. What they say, we pay retail prices as farmers and sell wholesale. That's kind of what screws us up.
Yeah, we always do that. In my engineering course now, I went through that in 1993. I graduated. But back at the time, a Crown Victorian was selling for about $36,000. There was $2,100 worth of material in that Crown Victoria. That's all it took to make the engine and all. That the raw materials was $2,100. And so if that doesn't tell you how much is the middleman worth, there's a lot in the middleman. Now, of course, that took in labor and everything else was in the price of the car. But if you can go direct to anything. But as farmers, like that, just I didn't know. I mean, it is a true statement, but it's always just been a joke around the table. But it still is a fact to today that, especially in the cash crop farming, we do buy everything at retail and sell our whole product at wholesale.
We do, 100%.
It's just what we do.
Yeah, and as soon as the industry sees that there's more profit, everything goes up.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I like, guys, I don't know why we do this. We seem to be happy with making the same amount every year. So as even if commodity prices go up, our input rise, all this goes up, it doesn't go down. Oh, we're making some more money, so we'll pay more land rent, so we got more. But at the end of the day, we've given it all away to just keep working.
Yeah. So this time,
not everybody does.
No,
but
it's true. Like this time last year, I think we were around $700 probably for 28%, maybe 800.
Yeah, I paid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And right now we're at,
I shouldn't broadcast that. That was a bad move on my part. But
not ever. That's pretty strong, Bill. Strong of you.
Yeah, finished off the side dressing at $475, so it didn't look.
Yeah. We're happy when people say the truth around here, because you're like, no, I got it for this price. No, I've actually bought some last year because I was supposed to mix up with some other product with $900. I was happy to get rid of most of that before the price went back down, but no, it was, and now where we at, I think 340, some was available right at this fall or whatever, or 300, somewhere in that neighborhoods, right? So, we've seen lower commodity prices, and now 28%, magically has got cheaper.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened, but
yeah.
I don't know. I think what happens though is that because, something has to play, right? So if expenses are going to be too high, then you're not going to grow corn, or you're going to go to something like beans, and
that's right.
A product that's not going to cost so much to grow, right? So it's all got to be there. It's always a bit of a struggle for farmers though, because some years you just want to go beans on beans on beans, right?
Yeah.
Just because your profit,
right?
Your expenses, everything that, and it doesn't make it like beans are pretty stable, like year after year after year. Like we see a 30-40% decrease in corn, right?
Oh yeah,
and you don't see that in beans. It kind of goes up 10%, it goes down 10%, that kind of stuff. But it typically is very stable. So, good. So what's the journey from here, Bill? Are you going family? You spending more time with family? What's the thing with that? Like, I saw you the other day. We were at church. You're doing more of the church thing too, or what's your journey from here? You had gotten to more of the educational stuff too, I think. You not?
Yeah. As we move forward, I mean, I think everybody does it. They go through phases of their life, and I grew up with a father who's a workaholic, so there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, taught you good work ethics. But as we move forward, it's like I said earlier on, that at the expense of being with my family, I was pushing making money versus being, and lots of guys do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as I get older, I mean, both our girls are married now. They're wanting to have children. There's been a few struggles with that, but we're looking forward to having grandkids, and so we're just changing a different phase in our life. We've got two girls that they're interested in farming and that, but I'm not sure how big they're interested in farming. So for Tammy and I, it's just making a decision, how can we spend more time with the family. Maybe just do a little more vacationing, go see the world that we live in. I mean, we work not as hard as some, but we've worked fairly decent, so we want to go see some things. And we just spend more time with the loved ones that we have, with friends and stuff. I mean, you were there, you watched my friends recommit and get baptized, so cool. It was a very special day for us all. And
that was awesome. Yeah, you slimmed down. You're looking healthier than ever.
Yeah. I'll talk to you that off air.
No, good for you, man.
I do feel great. I mean, from mid-September, I lost 73 pounds, but I didn't do it intentionally. So you can,
okay.
Yeah, we'll talk about it after.
Well, anyways, either way, you're looking good. So that's awesome. So, anyways, this is Billy. He's done a lot of work over the years and truck driving and doing everything like that, and helped my father out with the custom work. And I remember the other day I was talking to you. He says there's nothing much more you love than going back and forth in the field in the combine. That's like
the combine is my favorite part. Everybody on my place wants to spray because it's so fast. I hate spraying, but I'm anal, so I do it myself to make sure the proper chemical gets on. But I love combining. Combining is that time of year that I think almost every farmer loves, because you put all the work equity in all summer, and then you get to go and take the fruits of your harvest off of all your hard work. And it tells you a lot in the combine too. It's peaceful, but you're watching it. And I love running the combine, because then I can see, because I do the spraying. If you have a problem area in the field, you can see it. Physically can see it.
You're learning in the process.
Yeah, so that's what I like doing with the combine. And that, my wife loves combining and hates it when I get in the seat for her, and I tend to let her do that. She couldn't do so much this year because she had a surgery, but next year she'll be back in the combine again. But I love it just so I can see what the field actually turned out to look like.
Wow.
From a weed control issue.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. She didn't even yield, like if it's, maybe, hey, there's something wrong here with fertility or whatever else, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I never thought of that. We actually got all our combine custom done now, so we don't get to see that. But the truth is, I've never sat in a combine ever for more than a pass or two. So,
well, the one that I have run the combine, I'm like, what'd the field look like? She's like, good.
That's the problem.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, it looked good.
Yeah, you're not gonna learn much by that.
No.
So yeah. I mean, I think yield map's not gonna tell you a bit of stuff, but it doesn't tell you a lot if it's just because of excessive rain or a tile missing or something like that, right? Like that's the problem.
Yeah.
But
there's nothing better than visually seeing it. I mean, your technology can tell you a lot, but visually seeing it's just another form of information.
Yeah. Good. Well, thanks, Bill, for coming out. It was awesome, and we'll see where this takes us from here. But it's been a pleasure working with you over the years. I know you supported us at some other events in the past with some legal stuff, and that was awesome. I was kind of. We bought you a little gift for that time.
Yes, sir.
Right?
I shot a turkey 2 days later with it.
Really?
Yeah.
So I was like, well, what kind of gift could we get this guy? And I was thinking. I was like, what about a double barrel shotgun? Yeah. So
he was reading my mind. I had a lot of guns, but I never had a double barrel. And I was actually looking at buying one. And then when Andrew and that showed up with that, I'm like, right on. And I went and bought ammunition the next day, and we still had 2 days of turkey season left, so we went out and put one on the plate. Sorry for you non-hunters out there, but I love it. It was great.
That's awesome. Well, good. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be there for our next podcast here shortly. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Dirt Grow Podcast, where every Tuesday we dish out the dirt. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and check out dirtgrow.com for more content and episodes. I'll see you next Tuesday. Ciao.